Well, as I was thinking about next week being Commitment Sunday, as we're coming to the end of this thing, I think that every one of us has experienced big moments in our life that mark us in some way. Many times we experience these moments as individuals, but every so often we get to experience it in community with other people. I remember when I got to see U2 play US Bank Stadium, how much fun that was. I mean, that's a concert that you'll never forget. But this last Christmas, I was so excited because as part of my boys' Christmas gift, I got them Vikings tickets. And so for the very first time, they got to go to a Vikings game. And so I have a picture here. We went and my brother took a couple of his boys, and then we took my dad for his Christmas gift. And it was such an awesome time to be together. And for those of you that don't know, to my surprise at halftime, they did a corgi dog race. And our very own Muggy and Randy Peerfleece from Riverway Church was racing their dog during halftime. And I wasn't quick enough to get a picture of them on the screen, but that just blew my mind. I was like, that is so cool. Our Riverway people are just so talented. They're just all over the place. Look at that. Even their dogs are racing. But if you've ever been to a Vikings game, there's so much energy, right? If you've ever been to a big concert, when the band breaks into the familiar song and everybody starts singing together. Or at the Vikings game, when everyone begins the Skol chant, if you've ever been there, and the whole place erupts into this chant, the entire place comes alive. It's one of those everybody moments, right? I mean, it's where we're all in this together. We're all experiencing this together. But here's what I've come to discover, and this is the first fill-in on your notes, that big moments that are worth celebrating don't just happen. Big moments that are worth celebrating don't just happen. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of preparation, hard work that leads to the big moments in life. Whether it's a graduation, whether it's a retirement party, whether it's a wedding celebration, the birth of a baby, whatever it might be, lots of planning and effort goes into those big moments. And let me tell you, we are about to face our next big everyone moment next Sunday as we gather together and indicate the level at which we'll be involved financially over the next 24 months to make this building become a reality. That's right. It's our next big everyone moment. It's our allscape, right? Everybody involved. We're all in this together. And that's where I'm going to ask everyone, whether you're watching online or in person with us, everyone to fill out a commitment card because that's what the bank needs from us. Our bank is saying, hey, as part of your loan, we needed to see what your pledges are for the next 2 years. And that will be so important for all of us to fill out that card. And so if you're thinking, maybe I won't fill out a card and I'll just give, I want you to know that it actually helps us more to have you just fill it out because that is something we can bring to the bank and we can show them what our faith promises look like. And so speaking of promises, I have a couple promises as we near the end of this thing, right? We're not going to turn this into a telethon, right? It's not going to be hokey. I want to also make you the promise that we're not going to change the mission of the church. Through this building process, the DNA won't be lost. Right? As I said a couple weeks ago, our mission is to help people find and follow Jesus. Our mission is not a building. The building is simply a tool that will help us fulfill the mission. And the mission and the methods, those things are going to stay on point just like they have for the past 10 years. So this is what I want to remind you of as we get into today, your next fill-in, that this is not just a building campaign. This is a people campaign, right? Turn to the person next to you and say, it's a people campaign. Come on, tell the person next to you. If you're sitting at home, tell them next to you, say, this is a people campaign, right? This is not just a building campaign. This is a people campaign. And in every generation, God looks for those who will rise to the occasion and say, yes, God, you can use my life and my resources to help build your kingdom here on earth. And if you did not get one of these booklets yet, I'm just going to have you raise your hand. This is our Home for All booklet that explains so much of our campaign, answers so many of your questions. If you didn't get one of these, will you quickly raise your hand? And I want to have an usher just drop that over to you. Yep, just hold that hand up high and we'll get that to you. Thank you so much. Because this is an important part of what we're doing. And inside of that is one of our commitment cards. Again, we're not doing anything with this today, but there's something on the back of this commitment card that we haven't talked about yet that I wanted to lead you through, because as we've said from the very beginning of this campaign and this series, our prayer has been this, that God would stretch us and grow us to become more like him. And on the very back of this card is a ladder of generosity that we're going to put up on the screen that I just want to unpack just for a moment with you. Because every single one of us are at different levels, not only in our faith, but also in our level of generosity. We're all in different parts of growth when it comes to that. And the very first step for some of you, it says, I've not given before now. And for some of you, this might be your very first time that you're actually going to give in your whole life. This is your on-ramp of generosity, so to speak. And I want to tell you that if you're newer to Riverway or if this is your first time to give, what an exciting time to be a part of something like this. To see that your dollars and your giving are going to go to something so tangible that will make a difference for generations to come. But maybe for you, you've been giving, and that next step, maybe you find yourself there, that you're an occasional giver. It says, I give, but it's not consistent. Right? I give $20 here, I give $40 there. I'm an occasional giver. And if you're in that spot, I want to challenge you. I want to encourage you to let God grow and stretch your faith to that next level where you'd actually become a percentage giver. Now, for some of you, you're already doing this. Others of you, you've never been a percentage giver. My 15-year-old son, who got his first job this year, this has been really weird for me because before, up until this point, when they've gotten allowance, they've had their envelopes, right? Their give envelope, their save envelope, their spend envelope. And for the very first time, he's getting real paychecks, right, of over $100, if you can imagine that. Remember when you were 15 years old and you got your first paycheck, 14, and your mind was blown at how much the government took? Do you remember that? I mean, that was an exciting time, right? And so, you're opening up that paycheck, and we've been talking, and I've been so encouraged. He said, Dad, I need to make sure that I'm giving, and how do I do this now? And I mean, this generation, they don't even know what a checkbook is, right? I mean, they wouldn't write a check. And so I had to help him set up online giving for my 15-year-old son. I mean, just such a strange concept, but I'm grateful to do it. Why? Because he's becoming a percentage giver. And for some of you, you've never thought in those terms. Others of you would say, I can't afford, there's no way I could afford to give 10%, right? Which is the next level, a tithing, 10% of my income. So here's my challenge to you. If you're not a percentage giver yet, pick a percentage and start. Pick a percentage and start. Could you do 1%? Could you do 2%? Maybe 3 or 4%? Start somewhere, and as you begin to see God's faithfulness, grow in your generosity to him. I was talking to somebody just a couple weeks ago, and they said, years ago, you've challenged us to give 1% or 2%, and I started. He said 1% 3 years ago. He said, now I'm giving 15%. 15% to God. I've just grown in generosity. I've watched God provide, and now I've responded to him. And what I used to be afraid of, now I'm giving with joy. And I'm so excited to see what God is doing in my life. So maybe it's a percentage giver. Pick a percentage. That next level is to faithfully give 10%. Right? That's that word tithe actually means is 10%. And all throughout Scripture, we see this encouragement to give the first and the best of your income to God. And maybe you're already there, or maybe you've grown. Maybe before you've been a percentage, you've given 2, 3, 5%, and now you're saying, all right, even with this campaign, I'm moving to 10%. Or maybe you've already been a 10% tither, which would represent about 25% of our church. 25% of people who attend our church, based on, if we took just an even line of, a middle-class income, 25% of our church would be considered a tithing part of our church, where they're giving 10% or more. And if you're at that place where you've been there, I would encourage you, and that's really what this campaign is all about, is to become an extravagant giver. Right? Above my regular giving, God, I want to give to you. I want to honor you in a way that would be thankful and grateful for all you've done for me, right? We're not just giving to say, God, I'm giving so that you'll bless me. No, we're giving because he's already blessed us, and it's growing in our awareness of how we can grow in our faith, right? It's a stretching process. Your next fill-in, this process that God's leading us through of becoming more like Jesus requires a lifetime of surrender. That's what it takes. It's a lifetime of surrender. This is the process of becoming more and more like Jesus, surrendering to him. And I asked Nick, one of our campaign communicators, to just talk about this word surrender and a time in their life that they had to get to this point. And I want you to see what he said. Check this out.
My family and I took a huge surrender moment in 2014 when we went through the Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. And we came to the conclusion that we needed to do this through the idea of feeling like we were living check to check, even though we weren't. We had a savings account that was depleting. And so by God's nudge, we decided to jump in with both feet into the Total Money Makeover. We learned to work as a family. We felt like we needed to do this for the future of our family, but it didn't come without a cost, and that was changing our lifestyle. Our kids struggled with it. We weren't going out to eat much. We weren't buying things. I'm a car guy, not from a mechanical standpoint, but I love cars. I was driving around in a used, beat-up four-door Ford Fusion. Nothing against a Ford Fusion, but I couldn't get up a hill when it was snowing out. It was really tough. It was very humbling. When we got through the whole process, we knew God's plan was involved. We didn't know what the plan was, but we knew he had the plan. And it showed up in 2018. We had the opportunity to buy a home that we weren't looking for, and we found ourselves being homeowners on the Mississippi River. And there is no way we would have been able to be in this situation to purchase this home, which has really turned into our dream home, without going through Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover and surrendering. It was a great reminder that what happens with God and his plan, it doesn't always align with ours. And now we're able to be generous. At least we feel more empowered to do it. And providing it, a home for Riverway in the future and being a part of that at the ground level, it's beyond a blessing. Beyond a blessing. The path is never easy. The path is never easy, and you never know what the end looks like. But his plan is always better. Always.
There's a power in surrender. A power in surrender. It's actually the breeding ground for God to do his very best work in us and through us. Right? Just like Jesus said, if you try to save your life, you'll lose it. If you give up your life for my sake, you'll find it. We think that somehow surrender, we're losing out. But just like Nick said, no, it actually empowered us to do more than we've ever done before, to have more than we've ever had before, to be a blessing more than we ever have before. Why? Because they took a route of surrender. To say, God, your plan, your ways, your kingdom. And I think that's so powerful. So what does surrender look like to you? Well, Jesus helps us see this in John 6. And it's the story of when he fed the 5,000. Now, believe it or not, when I was 16 years old, I gave my very first message. And my very first message was this passage in John 6. The story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. I think it's a great story of surrender. I want you to read it with me. John chapter 6, we pick it up right in verse 1. And it says this: sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near, and when Jesus looked up, he saw a great crowd coming toward him, and he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" All right, so here's Jesus. He's tired. He's been preaching and teaching and healing people. Tries to get in a boat to go the other side of the lake to just get away. Well, this crowd just follows him all the way around, right? And people are coming from all over. He can't get away, even a moment's break. And as he's sitting at the top of this hillside, it's just covered. The hillside is covered with thousands and thousands of people. And he realizes these people are hungry. It's past the dinner hour. What are we going to give them to eat? Now, when we say this was the feeding of the 5,000, because in a moment you'll read that there were 5,000 men, doesn't even include women and children. And so a very safe estimate is that this was 10,000 people sitting on this hillside. And I think sometimes when we think of crowds, we're not very good at picturing that. So I want you to show you a picture of this, because I think when we think of a crowd of 10,000, we think of this, right? We think, oh, that's probably a crowd of 10,000. Nope, that is a crowd of 500. That's a crowd of 500. Here's a picture of 10,000 people. So if you can imagine 10,000 people on the hillside, and Jesus turns to his disciples and says, how are we going to get food for these people? And I can see the disciples scrambling in their mind, right? Thinking like, where's the closest Costco? I mean, where can we buy in bulk? Is there a Saul's Club around here, right? I mean, is there anything that we could go to figure out how are we going to do this? How are we going to feed all of these people? But here is the brilliance of Jesus. Oh my goodness, this is so good. Here's the brilliance of Jesus in verse 6, as it says this. Jesus asked this question only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Isn't that brilliant? Right, Jesus could have said, well, guys, I'm going to do this miracle, and we're just going to feed everybody. No. He puts the onus back on them and asks the question to test them. Why? Because he wants to see where their faith level is at, where they're being stretched to believe something bigger than themselves. Jesus was just asking this question to test them. I mean, have you ever thought that God is leading you at times into situations bigger than yourselves just to test you? That he already has in mind what he's going to do, but he's testing your faith. He waits for us to surrender. To his plan, he waits for us. And I believe, even when it comes to this project, God already has in mind what he is going to do. And he's saying, Riverway Church, I want to test you. I want to see where your surrender's at. I want to see where your faith is at. And will you be a part of this miracle? Will we put our trust in him? And so Jesus asked this question, how are we going to feed all these people? It's a test Jesus already has in his mind to do. And Philip answers him in verse 7, and this is what he says. It would take more than a half of a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to even have a bite. And Jesus quickly realizes, he's not there yet. All right, I've tested him, and he is not there yet. He is still thinking, how am I going to financially go buy enough food for this thing? Well, while another one of his disciples, Andrew, now this is Simon Peter's brother, he spoke up. And it tells us that he started going into the crowd to look for anybody who remembered to bring a dinner or a lunch, right? Does anybody have any food? He's going through the crowd. Does anybody have any food? And he comes back and he says, here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. And he asked the question that you would ask, or I would ask. But how far will they go among so many? Like, Jesus, I tried. I went out in the crowd. I found one little boy, and I asked him if he'd be willing to give up his lunch for the crowd, and he just laughed and said, sure, here you go. He was thinking, how in the world is this going to be enough? And yet here's this boy that says, God, this is all I have, but I'll surrender it to you. Jesus, this is all I have, but you can have it. I always think when it comes to surrender, God loves that kind of prayer. God's never looked at the amount, he looked at the heart. He's looked at the heart to say, is it surrendering to me? Is it a heart that is allowing me to stretch their faith, to lean and depend on me? I mean, that's the whole point of this thing of following Jesus, is to become more and more like him. Well, we can't become more like him without that stretching process. Isn't that true? Without moments like this. And I got to be honest, just like those disciples looked into the crowd and thought, how in the world are we going to do this? There's been so many times I've looked at this project and I've thought, God, how in the world are we going to do this? God is so much bigger than us. It's so much bigger than us. And then I'm reminded It's actually a great spot to be in because it causes you to keep leaning and depending on a God who says nothing is too hard for me. Nothing is bigger than me. And the truth is, your next fill-in, when faced with the impossible, God is waiting for us to surrender what we have to him. When faced with the impossible, God is waiting for us to surrender what we have to him. He's waiting. He's waiting. He's testing. Will we surrender what we have? And after hearing about all this from his disciples, he finally says, all right. In verse 10, he says, have the people sit down. And there was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men there were. And then Jesus took the loaves as the disciples are looking on. He takes this little boy's lunch out of his hands, and he gave thanks. And he began to distribute to those who were seated as much as they wanted to eat. I don't know what this would have looked like. I don't know if he broke the bread off and it just reappeared. I don't know but this is what it would have been like as he split these loaves and split these fish. It just kept reappearing. And the disciples were taking now baskets full of these and walking them through the crowd, and people were taking, and then they said, how many of you want seconds? Anybody want thirds? And by the end of this thing, the crowd was stuffed to the gills. And it says when they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled how many baskets? And they filled how many baskets? 12 baskets were left over, with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who has come into the world. Surely this is the one that we've been waiting for. Surely this is the one that we can entrust our lives to. And I think about this project and how it will represent exactly that. It will represent hope. It will represent the one who's able to change their lives. And what did it take? It took the surrender of one young boy that said, this is what I've got, but God, if you use it, it's yours. I'm giving it to you. And as I think about this project and what this building represents, what needs to be done from us, what's required of us, and it's simply surrender. To say, God, I'm going to give you what I have, and if you'd multiply it and use it to reach people. Because you may not realize this, but no matter what city you live in the Northwest Metro, 60% of your neighbors don't attend church anywhere. 60%, 6 out of every 10 people you walk into at Target are not going to church anywhere. They need this relationship with Jesus. And I think too many times we just assume that somebody else will do something about it. And we push the responsibility onto someone else. But can I tell you that it's not acceptable for followers of Jesus? Now, if you're here today and you're watching online and you're not a follower of Jesus, then you have options, right? You can decide what you want to do. But if you are a follower of Jesus, we have been mandated to step into the gaps of brokenness and bring solutions. We have been mandated by the Son of God to reach people who are far from him, to build his kingdom right here on earth, every one of us. To be a part of the solution that we are. It's not someone else's responsibility, it's my responsibility. And how did Jesus measure this? How did he measure surrender? How did he measure obedience? Look at this next fill-in. Jesus taught. Come on, you just read anywhere through the New Testament. Jesus taught that devotion to God is measured in terms of our devotion to others. right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. As you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me, Jesus said. Jesus taught that devotion to God is measured in terms of our devotion to others. And there are some that just say, well, I'm fine just giving my devotion to God. And Jesus himself would say, nope, that's not enough. And for those who just want to give me their devotion to know, you've missed the point. And we've seen this throughout history. Followers of Jesus have reached beyond every boundary into every nation around the world under the assumption that every person has been made in the image of God. That everybody has the right to have forgiveness just like you've received. Hospitals, orphanages, foster care organizations, homeless shelters, food pantries, local churches, they have been built to be giving out dignity to every man, woman, and child around the world. And every one of these places have been outgrowths of people who saw the world through the lens of Jesus' ethic and acted with a heart of surrender. You do realize that almost every major secular university in our country was once a school of ministry? That nearly every hospital that started with the Christians? That almost every foster care organization, every adoption agency started with followers of Jesus in our nation? Why? Because it was people who said, I'm going to take the responsibility of the brokenness I see around me and surrender what I have to God and ask him to do what only he can do. I'm going to be part of the solution. And that's why if you don't hear anything else, I want you to hear this morning, whether you're watching online or you're here in the room and it's your next fill-in, that you have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to live a life of surrender. You have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to live a life of surrender. And I wish I could fast forward 20 years and introduce you to some people whose lives have been forever changed because of your surrender. This future building represents hope. It represents a church that's here to stay. And when I think of growing up in the church, my dad was a pastor. I grew up in it. I was like born in it. I mean, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Tuesday night, Friday. I mean, we just lived it. I'm so grateful that the church saved my life. Not because I got into drugs or alcohol, a huge mess, and the church pulled me out of that, but because the local church prevented that in my life. When I try to imagine everything the church did for me, everything the church taught me, the people the church connected me to, when I think about my little youth group and the friendships I had that kept me walking on the path of Jesus, when I imagine where I'd be without the influence of the local church, it scares me. I think I'd be in a bad place. The local church informed my conscience of how I should live my life. It showed me how to live in the blessings of God, and it helped me turn from sin that would otherwise destroy my life. The church taught me that God had a plan and a purpose for my life, and it kept me seeking it. Church showed me how Jesus makes my life better and makes me better at life. The church provided the pathway for lifelong friendships, some of whom are sitting in this room that I've known for 20 and 30 years. And those friendships nurtured and filled my life with so much meaning. I'm so grateful for the local church. And it's what I want for you. It's what I want for your families. It's what I want for your kids. It's what I want for thousands of people that live around us who aren't experiencing this. I believe in the local church. And I believe that God's called us to build something that will help restore hope and purpose for people. But, and this is your last fill-in, building something for others requires us first to accept ownership and our God-given responsibility. If we're going to build something for someone else that's going to bring hope and purpose into their life, we first have to accept ownership and our God-given responsibility to provide for others what somebody provided for us. Because someone at some point did for you what I can only hope we can do for someone else. And there's some of you that have been saved from a life that has been a mess. And it was the local church that helped you get out of those ruts in life that were so destructive. And as you sit here today, I'm going to ask you to provide for the next generation what you wish someone had provided for you, that would have saved you decades of hurt, years of pain and regret. But we have to accept our ownership and responsibility. As followers of Jesus, will you do that? Will you surrender for this opportunity and add your life to the purpose of heaven to draw people into a loving relationship with God? Will you partner with your heavenly Father to build his church? I love this in Matthew 16:18. Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. And for every person that said, the church is in trouble, can I tell you it's not? Because the gates of hell will not prevail, right? There's nothing that is going to stop the church. The question is, will your life be a part of building it? Will your life make a difference in the local church for other people? And for this moment in our history, it begins with surrender and sacrificial giving so that we can build the future church. So we can build a future community center that will reach thousands of people for generations to come. And if we will, God will honor it and he will bless it. And before we close, I want you to hear a story from Amy Robinson, who attends our church, and how just a few months ago, she had to get to this place of surrender and what God did in her life. I want you to watch this.
Hey, my name's Amy. I live in Coon Rapids. I'm married to a wonderful man named Elijah. We met almost 17 years ago at North Hennepin Community College, and we have a beautiful daughter who's 5, and her name is Sydney. I was born and raised in Golden Valley with my brother and sister and mom and dad. Church and faith absolutely were a part of our childhood. Like most adolescents, our parents very much stressed to us the importance of church, however, give us a little bit more freedom to make some of our own decisions. And I'll speak for myself, I fell out of pattern with that. Now it's something that I crave, and especially want to show Sydney at this young age that it's so important to not only be involved spiritually and mentally, but physically be in front of people and around people who, follow and live the lifestyle that you want to live is so important. When we were invited to Riverway, the first impressions we got were, the welcoming, warm feeling of everybody. Sydney was young because we started in June of 2018. And I remember going to the parent viewing room, and there was like crackers, and there was diapers to use and toys. And if I had come completely unprepared, everything was prepared for me. And it just gave like an overwhelming sense of like, this is this is the village that one would need to help raise your kids and raise your children to follow that life that I was yearning for her to grow up in. That feeling has never changed in the 3.5 or almost 4 years that I've been at Riverway. It's never changed. November 21st, Ryan had presented the 90-day Tithe Challenge. As he was explaining it, I thought to myself, I have a lot to gain and nothing to lose. I had not tithed before in my life. I had given offering, but it would come out to be about 5 times the amount of what I was giving. And I closed my eyes and I said, okay, God, I'm going to do this. It's going to be tight, but I'm going to try it. The Tuesday after that, I got a text message from a coworker who was my manager was two managers before. Hey, Amy, her name is Britt. This is Britt. I don't know if you're still looking for a new job. I had at the time been looking for a new job for probably 18 months. I had said, yes, I'm still looking for a job. If you want to give her my information, that's fine. I didn't really think anything of it. That Friday was the first time that my tithe came out. And that night was when her name is Denali. Denali texted me and said, I'm Denali, I would like to talk with you briefly about a position that we have available. When can you talk? So we set up a time to talk the following Tuesday, which we talked. And she said, do you want to continue this conversation? And I said, sure, I'll continue it. So she set up 2 interviews, and those interviews went great. I mean, the connection that I had with all 3 of those people were like we had been working together for years. And I thought in my head, well, this is moving really fast. So she set me up to talk to one of the owners on December 21st. And over the weekend, I had kind of prayed about it, and I talked to my husband about it, and I talked to the gentleman on Tuesday, thinking to myself, do I really want to leave this safe, well-established company? I could feel my faith stretching, very much so. I remember going out to the garage to walk my mother-in-law out because she came over to watch my daughter, and she just looked at me and said, you have to relax. You've already prayed about it. It's in God's hands. You can't do anything. So she left, and I said out loud in my garage, and I looked up at the sky and I said, okay, God, my hands are out of it. You're all in. I'm trusting you. I can't think about this anymore. And probably about an hour and 15 minutes later, Denali had called with 2 offers that I really wasn't expecting. That to me was the clear-cut sign that this was the path that I was supposed to go. I'm 3-4 weeks into the job, and it's going great. Since that happened, there has been even more of a profound strength in my faith. There's no other way to explain it than through his power. I mean, he has to be here. There's no other way that this could have happened. It's much like the new building. Those 5 miracles that took place, for the land to get purchased. How else do you explain it? There's no other explanation. You could say, oh, what a coincidence. It's no coincidence. I can't reiterate enough is trust him. Lean in on your faith. Lean in on your friends and your family. Don't be scared to reach out and ask for, prayers from people. When I was able to kind of let go and just say, all right, I've prayed about it. I feel in my heart that this is right. I'm going to give it to you. You might not see it as fast as I did, but put in your work, God gives you resources and tools. Look for those things. He's going to present paths, and he's going to put things in your life. It's going to spark that faith. Trust in him. Watch him do what he does.
When Amy was telling me about this, she said, my application or my resume was on LinkedIn for 18 months to 2 years, and I didn't have any hits. And she said, the week after I decided and I started trusting God, I had this job offer that was bigger than anything I could ever imagine. I just thought, isn't that God? Right? That he brings us that place of testing. And it reminds me when Jesus asked Philip, where will we buy all the food we need? God already had in his mind what he was going to do, but he was testing to see if they would put their trust in him. And I believe that this is a test for our church to surrender and trust and do our part, that if we bring our loaves and our fishes and we say, God, here's what I have, I offer it to you, I'm surrendering it to you, that God will take this collectively and do a miracle.